everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Female Film Critics Panel. And today I'm really excited to have back on the panel. We have Kristen Lopez with us. And Kristen is a film critic and writer and expert on film in so many ways. And Kristen, thank you so much for coming on and talk with us.
Anytime. Super happy to be back.
Yeah. And I've been wanting to have you on for a bit because your book, the have you read the book? I got this last year and I really enjoyed it. And it's fun, just concept for a book like this, I think. And I think somebody could have a really good time going through each of your selections and both reading. And that would be a fun, like for a blog, a fun project.
I've heard people say that they have crafted like book clubs, which is very weird for me to think of that I've inspired anybody to craft a book club. But yeah, it exists.
Yeah, I think it's cool. So last time you were on as part of one of our group episodes. So we didn't really get a chance to like dive into your backstory and everything. But how did you get started as a critic?
Yeah, so I got my first film critic job at my high school prom. Somebody, a friend of mine's boyfriend, knew that I wrote all of the reviews for the school paper. They were not popular reviews because I did not go, I saw everything.
Yeah.
So I would see, maybe like the movies aimed at like my generation. But more often than not, I reviewed movies that were like older. Like when Match Point came out, I reviewed that. And so the teachers loved the reviews that I did. I'm not really sure how my peers felt about them. But somebody said, there's this place that I saw on Craigslist that's looking for, when Craigslist was still a legit place to find work. And they're looking for a film critic, and I was like, cool. They paid $25. I got one raise to $26 the entire time I worked there.
Yeah.
And I wrote all their reviews. And for me, it was just like, if I can go see movies for free, then I'll feel like I've accomplished something.
Right.
And then, I went to college, and, I wanted a way to, get into writing that was something that was low impact that I could do, and I did that for a while. I freelanced, I interned with places, but I wasn't actually making money on anything aside from the $25 that I was making. And then that site eventually didn't need a reviewer anymore. And I heard from friends about like people will pay you to write stuff. And I was like, what? People will pay? How have I been doing this for so long?
Yeah.
And it coincided right around the time I was finishing up my degree, and I needed to find a job. And as a wheelchair user, jobs are often harder. There's more limitations.
Sure.
And so I figured, I could write as a job until I found a real job. And then cut to, now, and I have come to the realization that this is my real job. And I just never found anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I can relate a little bit to that. It's just sort of evolved. And somebody was just telling me because we had a bit of a bad month with the podcast, and somebody was like, "Well, just take a break," and I'm like, it's kind of my job. like it's not, that's not really an option.
Yeah.
Like, as sometimes you just have to go with the there's peaks and valleys in every career, no matter what you
Definitely,
what
yeah.
you pick. Yeah. So did you major in film, or were you in journalism, or what did you major in?
No, so I was gonna major in journalism, and then I decided not to. I wanted a history degree, and my mom said, "You're not Indiana Jones. That's not gonna make you any money. So you need to do something that's going to be able to, like a fallback."
Yeah.
I took enough film classes that if I had filed the paperwork, I could have gotten a minor in film, and I just never did. But I majored in English, which, my parents were like, well, if all else fails, you can teach, which I did not want to do. And so yeah, my English degree is I have a master's in English from Sacramento State, and it's been something that I just have in my house.
Yeah.
Has not been utilized until I did my book.
Degrees too.
Until I did my book was the first time somebody had mentioned, when TCM pitched me on writing it, they were like, you have a master's in English. Do you read a lot? And I was like, that is the first time anybody has ever referenced my master's at all. And the answer is yes, I do read a lot. I read outside of my degree. So
Yeah.
yeah, it actually did finally pay off. It just took a really long time.
Yeah, I can relate to that too because I don't know. I feel like I loved going to school. I mean,
Same.
obviously there were hard things, but the experience as a whole, I really enjoyed. And that like feeling that you get at the end of a semester, I mean, look at all the stuff I learned. Like all of that I really liked about, and I've always been a big mentor person. So like the kind of teacher student relationship is always something that I benefited a lot from. And but as far as like nuts and bolts in my career and my job, like it's been completely worthless. Every career that I mean, aside from like learning how to write and learning how, like basic fundamentals, but like for the most part, my degrees were just a fun time.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
no like,
yeah.
yeah,
If I could, I tell everybody if I could go back to school and just like read and absorb and not have to do actual homework,
right.
I probably would have.
Yeah. 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 If I could just like audit,
Yeah,
yeah, that would be great.
that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so did you start out as a book reader or a movie watcher?
I started out as a book reader. Although movies were something that, my parents were big movie fans. We'd go to the drive-in all the time. So they
Oh,
really
fun.
did go hand in hand for me at a very young age. I was always the kid that my dad would get so mad at me because I would bring a physical book with me wherever I would go, even if it was like a trip to the gas station. He'd be like, "Why? Why do you need that?" I'm like, "Well, you never know."
Yeah.
When I can get now that I have a Kindle, I feel like joke's on him because I can have thousands of books in my purse and just take it with me wherever I go, which I do. And but at the same time, movies were definitely a thing that we watched all the time. I watched a lot of movies probably that I shouldn't have at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
So they really did dovetail. And as I got older, I started to the books I would read were often about movies. So,
Mm.
celebrity biographies or creation of the studio system. So they've really gone hand in hand
Yeah.
for most of my life.
Do you have a particular like genre that you gravitated to, especially when you were younger?
In films,
In well, films and books.
I mean, books, I've always been a nonfiction person,
Oh, okay.
so I again, I read a lot of, celebrity biographies, anything book, film related, history
Uh-huh.
related, nonfiction's kind of my thing. And then as far as film, I'll give anything a fair shake. But for me, it's always been, comedies, musicals, if we're talking classic films, I love, old movie musicals. So
Yeah, me too.
I'm a pretty equal opportunity, film person,
Yeah.
depending.
I am the biggest apologist when it comes to musicals. I'm just like,
Yeah,
oh, come on. It wasn't that bad. They were singing. It was
they're
fun.
great. And they're a genre that, sustained films for
Yeah.
decades. So, I mean, they might not be in the fashion right now, but historically, I mean, film would be
Hmm.
nowhere without the musical.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you just finished the Turner Classic Movies Film Festival. What was that
It,
like?
it's great.
Yeah, I want to go so bad.
I've been going every year since 2014. When the pandemic happened and they did two fests virtually, I've never felt like the pain of like having your heart broken,
Yeah.
quite like knowing that I couldn't go one year, let alone 2 years. And I know that's a collective feeling that a lot of the TCM, fest attendees know. It's great. It's great to just, nerd out for 4 days with people that, when you name drop like Mary Pickford or John Garfield, people know who you're talking
Yeah.
about. To get to watch some of these movies, beautiful movie houses have the celebrities come out. Certain times the celebrities will just like stay and hang out at the festival and just watch the movies as well. So it's really, it's unlike most of the other festivals. I've been to South by Southwest, I've done
Hmm.
AFI Fest, and those are great festivals. They have a great community, but the feeling that I get is far different,
Yeah.
when I'm at TCM.
That I would really like to go to that festival. My friend Stanford,
It,
he goes every year. He's a huge TCM person, and I don't know, just I love watching classic films in a crowd.
It's great. It's
It's a
great. And
special experience.
once you go once, it's very hard to not go again.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a gateway drug.
Yeah. And I've been to Animations Film, which is also the Chinese and is down there. And that's an extremely well run festival. Really good panels, really fun to, see a lot of films that you don't get to see on they go straight to streaming. You can see them on the big screen like Vivo. And I just saw Luca there in and
Mhm.
out. It's been on. And that's just really, really fun. And I got to see Belle Hosada's Belle, and he
Mhm.
was there and introduced it. And that was like I think one of the first movies that I saw with like a completely full crowd after the closures, where everyone was every seat taken. That there was just weren't that many movies like that. So that it's just a fun experience to be part of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely worth it. When I go to other festivals, oftentimes there's a monetization factor. I'm there to see
Sure.
the movies, to make, find a way to review them, to make money, or to
Hmm.
be in the conversation about what's happening right now with film. TCM,
Yeah.
you don't have that. It's pure fun. Like, sure, I do it for my podcast, and I cover it for my blog. But it's doesn't feel as stressful as some of the other festivals where you are working.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. This was such a bummer this last South by Southwest. I was so excited, looking forward to it, and then I got really sick. It wasn't COVID or anything. It was actually just it was allergies that then turned into like a sinobronchitis kind of a thing. And it was just a bummer, you're just like, oh, best laid plans.
Are you a fan of Rachel's reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/hallmarkies.
To ask you about 2024, how do you feel the year has been so far as movies go? What do you think?
I come at it from a disadvantage because I have not seen nearly as much as I would like, just because of a bunch of other craziness that's gone on in my life. Now that I'm, working full-time author life right now,
Yeah.
the ability to see movies, which is great. So I'm kind of playing catch up in between writing books and, revisiting other movies that I love that I just want to watch. So I feel like I have not seen nearly enough right now, but this year has been really interesting. I know that usually January, February, March are pretty dull months. They
Yeah.
feel a bit duller this year. I think because we're slowly gonna start feeling the effects of the strike. There's still less
Yeah.
content being released. Disney doesn't have a movie coming out until June, or May, I
True.
think.
It's true.
So there's a lot less coming out, it feels like.
Hmm.
At least stuff that's gonna last in the zeitgeist more than a week or
Yeah.
two, or a couple of days. So I'm
Yeah,
holding
even
out hope
on
that
even on Hallmark Channel, they're instead of new movies, they're repackaging. They're because they used to have two channels. Now and that they would air dramas on, and now they're just repackaging the movies from the old channel onto the new channel. They're not actually like giving us very many new movies. It's like, yeah,
yeah.
everybody's kind of
Yeah, and it's definitely, I'm hoping that come the summertime, you know, things will start to pick up. Especially, and there's stuff in the fall that I'm really excited to see. So I'm hopeful that, we'll get through things, but I think we're gonna start to see a lot of the studios kind of really try to space out their content because we're gonna hit a gap,
yeah.
to account for the strike, as the year progresses,
Hmm.
especially early into next year too.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my favorites haven't actually been released. Because I saw them at Sundance. But I really liked a little movie called Ghostlight, about this kind of grumpy construction worker that ends up playing Romeo in a production of Romeo and Juliet. That one I really liked, and I really liked a little movie called Musica,
Mhm.
that was at South by Southwest. I just thought it was so creative, and it's just like a look into this this guy's head, and the way that he kind of sees the world. And I really loved that. My favorite mainstream is probably Arthur the King. I feel like that's not that popular, but I really liked it. I thought it was so sweet, and I was just so happy that the dog didn't die at the end. I was like, yeah. I know they were like trying to push people's buttons, and they successfully pushed mine. So for that, I really did enjoy it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean for me, yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat that a lot of the stuff I'm excited for
Mm-hmm.
is not out yet.
Right.
For me, I mean, if we're looking at some of the stuff that I liked, I did really enjoy Immaculate,
Uh-huh.
which, thought that was really, really entertaining. Lisa Frankenstein's very cute. I wish
Uh-huh.
that it done more. There's a movie I saw at Sundance called A Different Man with Sebastian Stan that's not out yet. It's really good,
Oh.
that I can't wait to have more people see and fail at
Yeah.
being able to accurately talk about it.
It was a
Um,
pretty good Sundance, I feel like.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, other than that, I mean, when people ask me like, "Oh, what's been the best movie you've seen so far?" I'm just like, "There's not a whole heck of a lot of options unless I'm
Yeah.
missing some stuff." You
Yeah, if
know,
you're not a big Dune person, it's been a little rough,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
I'm not.
my big movie that I was really excited for was Challengers, and I did not
Mm.
like it, which broke my heart because I really wanted to love
Yeah.
it. So,
I was
so yeah,
mixed on it. I was
yeah,
mixed on it. I did go fresh, but it wasn't like a strong. I I thought it was entertaining enough, but I don't think it's being sold accurately. You think from the ads this is going to be really steamy, that this is going to be
yeah.
like, and it's really not.
It's being sold as kind of like a throwback to the 80s like erotic thrillers,
Yeah,
or more like the 90s erotic thrillers, which there is a difference for me.
yeah.
Which I love the erotic thriller. It's a genre I wish would come back. This is not an erotic
No.
thriller, 80s or 90s. It's very chaste, and
Yeah. Like
I
they're
I
trying to make it look like it's body heat or something like that, and
yeah.
it's just not.
Yeah, and they're selling the selling of the threesome is kind of like a big thing that this movie's been doing, and that is a very
Yeah.
like chased sequence. I
Yeah, it
haven't
really is. They're
read
fully
enough.
clothed the entire time, almost the whole movie. There's like
Yeah,
two tiny little scenes, and where you briefly just see the after,
yeah,
and that's it. And I mean, I told my friend, I don't even think if there wasn't that locker room scene and some language, I don't even think it would be rated R.
yeah. I don't think so at all. So it definitely, as somebody that kind of had expectations of what the
Yeah,
movie was going to be about, was really not feeling it. And also just the filmmaking is really, really weird. It's not Luca's best, in my
no,
opinion.
I
And
agree.
I think the script is very weak. But Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor are really good.
Yeah,
Which was great.
it just feels
But
like a movie that could have been better. Like
yeah,
I
it
thought it
should have
was
been way
fine.
better. Yes.
I liked it fine, but it does definitely feel like a movie that could have been better. I'm with you there. Well, so for your book, you picked 52 movies, books that were made into movies. How did you come up with those 52?
It's so funny. People have asked me, 52, did you pick one for every week of the year? And I was like, oh, wish I was that smart.
Yeah.
It was a real collaboration with TCM. They
Oh,
said I could
interesting.
pick I could pick between 40 and 100 of whatever I wanted, but it had to be diversity of authors, diversity of genre, diversity of time periods, which I agreed with. I wanted to make sure that there were female directors, female authors, authors of color, directors of color, And then they had some other things that they wanted. They wanted Dune. Dune was required because Dune was coming out at the time that I was writing it. So they were like, you need to include Dune because corporate daddy at Warner
Yeah,
Brothers
makes sense.
wants that.
Yeah.
So that was one book that I was required to include. But at the same time, they also wanted, there were some rules in the sense of like the movie and the book have to be in print. So you have to be able to, people have to be able to buy whatever. So that kind of put out a couple of things where, either the book was not easy to find or the book was out of print. And then the other thing was they had to be actual books. So they couldn't be novellas, they couldn't be short stories.
Like an article or something.
Yeah. So they had to be actual books. And for me, my big criteria was that I wanted to actually love the book because the book is called But Have You Read the Book? So there's a couple movies where I was like, I love the movie. I know it's based on a book, but I hate the book. And
I'll be curious because I did a little video over on my channel where I talked about movies I think are better than the books. And so I'll be curious to hear what those are and see if maybe they might match up with some of mine. You did say in the book that you always read the book first before seeing the movie, or you try to.
Yeah, I'm very impatient. So if I find out, that there's an adaptation that's being made and I like the story, or sometimes more importantly, if there's somebody I love that is in it, I will need to know what to expect because I can't wait the year or 2 years that it's going to take for them to make this movie and put it out. So I will usually read the book first so that I can feel like, okay, I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to prep, and sometimes that doesn't always work out because books get changed as they get adapted. But yeah, I'm very impatient. So if there's an adaptation coming, I'm like, I got to read the book. I'm going to do it first and foremost.
I feel like I am the same. Everybody is so spoiler conscious these days. They don't want to know a single detail about what it is they're going to see. Whereas I'm like, no, I want to read it. I want to know exactly the whole plot.
Yeah, I want to know. I want to know what's going on.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, especially in certain genres, it does add to the experience. And, especially like if I'm going to go see a Shakespeare play or a movie based on Shakespeare, I definitely, for those kind of things, I like to have read it first so that, it just makes it much easier to understand the language and, you have some frame of reference going into it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean certain adaptations, the tone can be different. People can die that in the book that don't die in the movie. So I always say like it's fun to if you're feeling like a movie is missing context or you like a character and you're like, why doesn't that character have more? I always say like at least try the book because it might often have the things that you think were missing from the film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a good example last year, I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue. And they did change a bit from the book, but I nothing that to me felt substantive. Like they got rid of his sister. They but the core and of the book and every like major scene that you wanted, the Red Room, the other things like that were really popular in the book, like those were all there. And so it didn't really bother me the changes they made because I felt like nothing was substantive that was cut.
Yeah, and I mean I've talked to screenwriters that have done adaptations and they've told me that adaptation's really hard because even though you have a guide, for what is supposed to happen in the movie, you have to please an audience that has no concept of the book and just wants to see a good movie.
Right.
And then you have to please an audience that knows the book, loves the book, and has certain expectations of what's supposed to be in there. And those can be two very disparate audiences.
Yeah.
A great example that I always tell people if we talk about like adaptations that I would just love to sit down with the screenwriter or the director and just ask them what was the thought process there is it came out during the pandemic, but it was Warner Brothers' big adaptation of Those Who Wish Me Dead, which with Angelina Jolie. And if you have not read the book, you should. It's a freaking amazing book. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. But the book, the main character in the book is not the main character in the movie. they switch the
Oh,
plot lines.
see, that's
And
substantive. That's like a
it's
big
very substantive. So they make Angelina Jolie, who's got a character in the book that is a smaller part. They make her the lead character, and the character that John Bernthal plays in the movie,
Mhm.
which is the lead in the film or in the book, is a
Yeah.
smaller part in the book. And it just, the minute I noticed that, I was like, I was out. I was like, nope. I know what I wanted, you know, because as a
Yeah.
book lover, I loved the story as it was presented. And as a film lover, as somebody who loves John Bernthal, I was like, why is he not? This was supposed to be a lead role. The book told me this is a lead role. So
Yeah.
it did not work for me. And I still to this day would love to know why Taylor Sheridan felt the need to do that. I feel like he needs to atone for it.
Yeah, and another good example of that would be the 2022 version of Persuasion.
Oh, I didn't
Because
see that one. Yeah, but I've heard
it's terrible. Don't.
Yeah.
And the thing is that I am like super forgiving when it comes to like giving people a lot of leeway when it comes to adaptations of classics. Like I don't think it has to be exactly, especially with ones like Jane Austen or Christmas Carol, or some of these stories that have been done so many times. Like I actually enjoyed the Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Like I have no, like it's fine. But this one it was like they take this character of Anne Elliot, who's soft-spoken and sweet and kind, and that's what people love about her, and they turned her into this wine drunk who's being sarcastic and breaking the fourth wall, and the thing about it that didn't work is that if you're going to completely change the story, you have to give us something else that is good on its own. Like if you're going to be subversive, the subversion has to be good on the own. And in this case, it wasn't, because it doesn't make any sense for her character. Like, why would she be persuaded against this guy if she's this person? If she's mouthing it off to everybody and drinking and, like she's not the kind of person that's going to be, persuaded against her man, and so it doesn't make any sense. And so that's when it gets into problems, I think, is when not only do you not honor the book and satisfy the fans who are turning in because they love the book and the characters, but you're not giving them anything satisfying in replacement.
Yeah, for me, it's in But Have You Read the Book? And I've talked about it with anybody that'll ask. Wuthering Heights is kind of the film, there is the book that I always get very protective over when they adapt it. There have been many adaptations, and I say the same thing about like Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is a really great example. Another great example. Your Brontes, there's always questions. But for me, most adaptations of Wuthering Heights don't adapt the second half of the book. They tend to focus on the first half because the second half has a lot of characters that have mashup names from previous characters. There's a lot of like weird inbreeding. You have two characters named Kathy. But I think for
it
me,
feels like she had to add that on by the publisher to me when I read that
possible.
addendum.
I think it's more of the whole concept of like generational trauma can be fixed eventually. And I don't know.
It just feels like they were like, you have to give this a happy ending.
But when I see film versions of the book, I always just kind of am weirded out by certain decision making. So like, the 1939 Laurence Olivier version is great. Doesn't include the second half of the book. And it's very much a love story, for the ages. Very much this happy ending where they die. But they're reunited in death, so it works out. And then in 94 they redid it, where they did the full book, which I'm convinced it was because of the success of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that Branagh did. So they decided, and I think they call it Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, where they do all the book, but they put like, I always get it confused if it's Juliette Binoche or Julia Ormond, where they have her play both characters. So she's playing.
Oh, that's confusing.
And she just gets to wear this like hideous wig. She's supposed to be playing like a teenager in the second half of the book. It's very funny, very dumb. And then there's been other versions. MTV did a musical modern version with like a bunch of young people. That's very fun to watch. But for me, the one I always kind of roll my eyes over is, I love Andrea Arnold, but she did an adaptation, I think in like 2011, that was race swapped. So they made Heathcliff played by a black performer, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that is
She
interesting.
also made Heathcliff just like completely unlikable. And Heathcliff on the page, let's be real, is unlikable. He is
It's pretty
abusive. But like
unlikable.
he's hanging dogs from fence posts, and it's just it's a
Yeah.
really ugly adaptation. And I get that the point of I think that she's trying to make in that is that these characters are all horrible, which sure that tracks. But it makes for a very unappealing
Yeah.
watch, which was not
Yeah.
for me. We did an episode of my podcast. We do a bonus series called "But Have You Read the Series," where we talked about Jane Eyre and we
Uh-huh.
compared it to the 1940 version of Jane Eyre, the 2011 to the 1940.
Oh, uh-huh.
And the 1941, I think is a fun. It's a great example of how tone can play with an adaptation.
A
So
lot of melodrama in that one.
yes,
Yeah.
the original Jane Eyre with Orson Welles is very much kind of like Rebecca. It's very shadowy and mysterious, and is Orson Welles a horrible human being? Is he not? Which is fun. And then the 20, the Cary Fukunaga version just goes for like just what if Jane Austen or what if Emily Bronte's Charlotte Bronte, excuse me, feel free to cut all of that out if you don't. What if Charlotte Bronte's book was just like super sweaty and like everybody had feelings and it's great. I love that both of those things coexist. So I tell people,
me too.
if you want a classy Jane Eyre, you can watch the 1941. If you want a horny Jane Eyre, we have the 2011 one for you to watch.
Yeah, it's like exactly what I was saying. Like if you're going to be subversive, especially on a classic, like subvert it with something that's entertaining, with something that makes sense, that works for your new characters that you're creating. And I totally agree.
Hey, this is David from the Piecing It Together podcast, a podcast about movies and the movies that inspire them. For over 4 years, each week, a guest and I take a look at a new movie through the lens of what other movies we think were either an influence or connect in some other way. It's a fun, unique way to discuss films that leads to a great list of other movies to check out that either explore the same themes and ideas or maybe utilize similar filmmaking techniques. Including special episodes in our side series that twist the format, we've done over 200 episodes, so there's bound to be one on a film you've been thinking about and want to dig deeper into. So check us out on all the major podcasting apps and at piecingpod.com.
So I thought it was interesting that of all the Austen books, you pick Emma and Clueless. I thought that was interesting that that's the one you picked.
Yeah.
How'd you decide on that?
There were several authors that I wanted to do multiple books. And, if I had my way, it would have been just like a lot of Jane Austen adaptations and Dennis Lehane adaptations, probably.
Yeah.
They were like, Kristen, you can only do one crime book. Just like, you got to mix it up.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I knew that, I could only pick, one Emily Bronte. So I picked Wuthering Heights, and I knew I could only pick one Austen. And there were so many options, but I went for something, a big thing is we want to talk about how adaptations can be played with. So another thing I did was I did Dangerous Liaisons with Cruel Intentions. So, how do you look at comparing a French epistolary novel, which is written in letters, with a, 1990s teen drama? With a lot of sex in it. So I did the same thing with Clueless. Most people I know who saw Clueless, including myself as a kid in the 90s, we were all in love with like the bright colors and the pop culture and wanting to be Alicia Silverstone. And then you find out that it's actually based on this, book from the 1800s. And you're like, what? And I think what makes Clueless so timeless is how it really does take Emma and translate it in a way that is relatable. You can still find all of the elements of Clueless that you love, or Emma that you love, and you can find them in those characters. I took a film class, which we did read. It was a film is lit class, so we did read Emma, and we watched Clueless, and my professor, this was in high school, so my teacher at the time gave us a list of characters and was like, these are all the characters from Clueless. Tell me which characters they're based on in Emma. And it was really interesting to find out how the script lifted certain characters, or in some cases kind of mashed them up to really do a great representation of the original novel. And there
Yeah.
have been more straightforward versions of Emma. You know, for me, was raised on the 96 version with Gwyneth Paltrow. Which is, you know, fun, but it's
Yeah.
not Clueless. So it's more staid. You know, or now there's the Autumn DeWilde version with Anya Taylor-Joy that's out.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I love
But
that
I
one.
really did want to show kind of the breadth of the adaptation process.
Mhm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
I was like, how do you take this book from the 1800s and make it contemporary to a 1995 audience? You know, that
Yeah.
had to be a challenge.
Because it pretty much is beat for beat Emma, except for Mrs. Weston. That's really the only character
Yeah.
that's not, that's not there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I really wanted to showcase that, you know, some authors or some screenwriters have to go really, really deep into the weeds to adapt,
Yeah.
a great example I always tell people is, you know, adapting classic literature from a previous century is braver soul. You know, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But a great example is that in 2013 they adapted Emile Zola's Therese Raquin, which has been adapted numerous times, but they adapted it in 2013, I think, with Elizabeth Olsen and Oscar Isaac. They called it In Secret, and it was very much a bodice ripper, kind of like erotic thriller,
Yeah.
double indemnity type of thing. But I read the original book to find out what I was in for, and it's always funny to find out what screenwriters are like. A modern audience is not going to be chill with any of this, because in the original Therese Can, you know, the wife wants to offer husband to be with the other guy, and so they do that in the book. They do, and in the movie they kill off the husband. And as the movie progresses, they start to mistrust each other, and they start to kind of look at each other askance. Who's going to tell on whom? But in the book, there's a lot of, because it was, I think, written in like the 1800s, 1700s, maybe. You know, there's a lot of like moral issues, like, is God punishing them? So like the character that Oscar Isaac plays in the book, you know, gets bit in the tussle with the guy that they throw overboard, and the guy bites him. And throughout the book, they're like, the bite gets redder and uglier as the horror of what they've done intensifies, almost like he's like a fungus, like literally growing on him. And at one point, the character starts to think that the cat is like suspicious, like the cat knows what's going to happen to them. The cat it's going to tell on them. So the Oscar Isaac character kills the cat. Which I was like, well, coming off of Llewyn Davis, I'm pretty sure they didn't want to include him cat killing. And then there's also like the Elizabeth Olsen character gets pregnant, but she's like, I can't have a murderer's baby. So she makes the Oscar Isaac character get really mad. And he like beats her up, so she loses the baby. I'm like, all of these things for a modern audience, they're gonna read this and they're gonna be like, this is so stupid. This is crazy bananas, and it's dumb as hell. And I love that, you know, certain screenwriters are kind of stymied. Like, how do we take this out? We can't include some of these things, not just for content, but because an audience isn't going to buy it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, I mean, do you think that there are certain books that are just unfilmable? I mean, they've tried and it's just.
Oh. I mean, I'm sure there are, you know, I know that I watched last year as kind of like a new discovery. I watched one of the few film versions of The Fountainhead they've done.
Oh,
Ayn
yeah.
Rand is famously unfilmable. They've tried for decades to do a lot of her work. And I watched it, and I will tell people The Fountainhead is hilarious. I'm sure that's not the intent of the book. I've not read the book because the book is like huge.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious how they tried to adapt it. So I think certain authors, especially authors with a really staunch point of view, you know, is a big deal. The one I always go to, and I know a lot of people, it's kind of like unfilmable book 101, is the book House of Leaves. I read it in college, and it's a really interesting premise about a family that moves into a house that they think is weird. But the whole process of reading the book is that as the book goes on, and as these characters get more and more into the house that they're living in, the process of reading the book changes. The words will be on like the edge of the page, and you have to turn the book around to read what's going on, or it's, you know, maybe like one letter on one page. So they're deconstructing not only how do you tell a story, but how do you read a story like this. And nobody's going to be able to pull that off at all.
Yeah. I think there's two that I think of. One is definitely A Wrinkle in Time. I just don't think that it is filmable. Like, so much of what's happening is in Meg's mind as she grows and changes as a person. And there's like a spirituality to the book that is really hard, I think, for modern adapters and audiences to translate over. And there's just so many different worlds and so many different. Maybe you could do a mini series on it, maybe, but I just don't think it's possible. And then the other one was The Book Thief by Marcus Zussek, which is probably my favorite book. I absolutely love it. And they did about as good a job as I think they could have done. Like, it's not a terrible film, but it's just it's because you have this narrator that's death of in the book, and it's all set in Germany in World War II. And there's like books within a book, and there's different, like, there's just so much going on that really, to me, was so fresh and exciting as a reader. And I connected so much emotionally. And one of my favorite things in a book is when I am like, when a book is rich. And what I mean by that is that, like, it's not just like your two lead characters, but I'm caring about like character 9 over here, like the sub character like has a whole story arc, and I'm invested. And that The Book Thief does that incredibly well. You have people that are just in for a couple scenes and they make a big impact. And I just loved the book, and the movie was fine, but the book is so special that and I just felt like with the narration, I just don't think you can do it. I don't think. I mean, some of my favorite book to movie adaptations. I mean, a lot of them are actually miniseries. Like, I love The Anne of Green Gables with Megan Follows. That's a favorite. I love, of course, The Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. And I love The North and South, Richard Armitage. A lot of those are my favorites adaptations. But I also love most of the Merchant Ivory, but their Howard's End is
it's a good one. Yeah,
so good. Oh, that's a movie and book that's very rich. Like, you care about these. It's not just the two sisters that you care about. And so that's a favorite for sure. And Room with a View, of course. So good. Well, and of course we have the Bridgerton series coming up, which I'm like obsessed with, and the books. I love the books. So I'm so excited for the new season.
I mean, I'm terrible at TV, but I will probably watch it.
Yeah.
Seen the first two, so.
Oh yeah, you got to then. You got to.
I'm committed.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anne of Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
What do you think that reading versus film sort of provides? They're different. Why you would say people should read and be invested in movies?
I think that books are the original IP, before we had Marvel and, board games that were being adapted for film, it was books. Every major studio had a person whose sole job was to read all the books that were coming out or were being sold to see if they had potential for adaptation. So, they are the foundation of why we have movies in many ways. They're the original stories. Yeah. And I think for me, I always tell people, books are worth worth the read, not just if a movie you think is bad, you maybe want a better interpretation of it. But you can get into more of the interiority of a character, because you have omniscient narration in many instances. There's no real time limit. So you can, get a full story in 300 pages that maybe you don't get in a 90-minute movie or a 2.5-hour movie. You also can get more diversity in many instances. A great example is people that complained about Killers of the Flower Moon being focused more on Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio's character. If you read the David Grann book, it's very much about the Lily Gladstone character. It is her story. She's the first person you meet, and you see her trajectory throughout the whole book. So in many instances, film is about getting butts and seats. What is going to sell the most tickets? And oftentimes you get a lot of those unfortunate moments where the emphasis is we need white audiences or white men to come see these movies. So if a book is maybe focused on a woman of color or just a woman or any type of character of color or a disabled character, that's usually the first thing that gets changed in order to appeal, and I'm using air quotes, to a wider audience. So I always say, if you're looking for more diversity, you'll find it in literature than film. At the same time, I mean, film is a global medium, and film often has the ability to inspire people to read, so if you grew up loving Jurassic Park and you're like, oh, I never read the book. I don't know how many people would have read Jurassic Park, Michael Crichton's book was a bestseller when it came out, so a lot of people read it, but I think a lot more people have read it since seeing Jurassic Park. So they both have elements, in the sense of if you want to just get great stories, and
I think they feed the brain differently. I mean, there's something about living with characters for a while. I am a pretty fast reader, but still, I mean, it's just a longer experience than watching a movie. But then I also kind of I find it very satisfying to get a whole story in 2 hours. There's something, but it's just a different kind of part of the brain, I think.
Yeah, and I mean certain stories, just will not get adapted as we've talked about, so sometimes the only option you'll get is the book or for me, I think that there have been just so many great ways in, I watched trying to think of, adaptations just in school, that I watched.
That is true. I mean, we're never going to get a Salinger movie.
Yeah, exactly. And I also, I mean, from a film perspective, I don't know how many people would have necessarily read, Macbeth without maybe seeing the film version, any of the film versions in school, or how many people would have read House of Mirth without seeing the 2001 adaptation, which by the way is a favorite of mine. So, they go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, so I had my little video where I had the books. I had my little video where I had the movies are better than the books. So see what you think. The first one that I talked about is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And this is interesting because this was actually adapted and directed by the author of the book. So I think that that's probably why they got the upgrade. So I think, and the book is written is an epistolary novel, which isn't my favorite, through letters. And I really connected emotionally with the movie. I really loved it, and the performances. And I just think he gave it the upgrade. It's much better, in my opinion.
I read the book. It's been a long time since I've read the book, but I remember I read it in one sitting, which usually doesn't
it's
happen.
not long.
But it helps that it's also not long. But I remember just as soon as I opened it, I finished it. So I remember really liking the book. And then the movie, I think the movie really captures, a moment in time. I think a lot of, teens that are kind of on the verge of going into adulthood, it captures that spirit so well. The movie is hard for me to deal with now. It's problematic because of casting. But at the same time, it's definitely one of the great, I think, teen movies of all time.
And one thing I love about that movie is that the parties actually feel like a legit party. It's not these over the top. I've never heard of those parties actually happening in real life. It's just kids hanging out in their basement. Like
it doesn't look like something out of Euphoria.
Yeah, exactly. Next, I actually have The Sound of Music, which I think is so interesting because I feel like The Sound of Music has upgraded every step along the way. I actually read Maria von Trapp's book, and it is so boring. It is just like the driest. Like, it is not interesting at all. And then then they make it into the stage version, and if people go see the stage version, a lot of times they're kind of shocked because it's really different. They moved stuff around for the movie, which I think was very smart. They added a couple new songs. They took away songs that don't work. The Baroness is a lot more sinister in the musical than she is portrayed in the movie. Because her songs are ones that are cut basically, and Max is more isn't as lovable in the stage versions. Anyway, I just think it's an interesting version because I do think that each step along the way they made it better till it's the final version.
I haven't seen the Broadway or the stage play. I've only seen the movie, but I have read several books about the making of The Sound of Music, and I've heard that they took some liberties historically with the Von Trapp singers, which I understand, but I think the movie it's a classic. It's one of my favorites. The Baroness, I love her. Justice for a single woman that doesn't like being around children, especially as many of them as there are.
Because in the stage version, she sings The Lonely Goat Herder when the kids are scared. And then she sings My Favorite Things in the place where the Lonely Goat Herder is. And I just think it works so much better in the movie.
Yeah, but the movie's fantastic.
Yeah. And Edelweiss and I Have Confidence were both written for the movie.
Oh, okay.
And, so it's just interesting. But
shout out for Christopher Plummer, just
oh my gosh,
in that movie.
Yeah. So next is one I think is very underappreciated, underrated. It's Far from the Maddening Crowd. I did see the movie first before reading the book, and I haven't seen the 1960s one with Julie Christie. I've heard that that's really good. But I loved this version with Carey Mulligan. I thought it was so beautiful. I loved the cinematography. I thought their chemistry was really great. I liked her character. And then the book it gets like lost in a lot of the politics of the day, which I'm sure was really interesting at the time. But like, I was just so much more interested in what was happening with the characters. And I'm like, oh, okay. Let's move on with all this political conversation. And we read it for my book club because so many of us had loved the movie, and we were all like, what? So.
Yeah, I mean, that's Hardy for you. I mean, Thomas Hardy is definitely one of those that people love to adapt his books, but there's a reason most people don't read them. Far from the Maddening Crowd isn't my favorite. I've seen the Julie Christie version. I've seen the Carey Mulligan version, but I've only been one and done. And I think close to when the 2015 came out. So I don't really remember. I think I was more like, I like them, but for me, I mean, the Thomas Hardy one that I always kind of gravitate towards when I talk about adaptations is Tess of the D'Urbervilles. It's just a book that makes you laugh. And I don't think Thomas Hardy intended it to be funny. But he's got like a quite literally like mustache twirling villain. You have a babe in the wood. I mean, his characters are so two-dimensional. There's a character named Angel who literally is like supposed to be the representative of all that is saintly and good in men. So and his issues with women are just really problematic. But I mean, so they definitely, I remember them being like, we have to find a way in 2015 to make Hardy less Hardy. But I remember liking it when I saw it.
Yeah. Well, I have three more, but we'll just go over. I'll just say them real quick. But it's I have The Princess Bride, which was also adapted by the author of the book, and I think that he upgraded it because in the book, the little commentary by the grandpa is him as the author, and I just find him so annoying. I'm like, shut up, let's move on. And I like what they did with the movie so much better.
I saw the movie first. The movie is, it's an all-timer. I love it so much.
It's
But
so good.
I think William Goldman's the way he plays with how you tell a story in that book with the digressions and all of that, I find that really funny in the same way talking about unfilmable works, in the same way as like Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, those asides are really funny. And I also do wish, I know that they said they didn't have the technology and the money at the time to pull it off, but I do wish the forest, the torture forest that is in the book with all of the different animals that can kill you, that Hudson had been in the book. I don't often ask for set pieces, like a great example is The Shining. Like nobody wants the topiaries to come to life like they did in the book.
Right.
But I do wish the forest had been adapted from Princess Bride. Because I just would love to see it.
Then the next one I have is Mary Poppins. And I know that this is controversial because the movie and everything, but I don't like those books. I think they're sanctimonious and not fun. There's no whimsy. You feel like you're getting lectured. It's just not. I found them completely joyless and like maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I just found them really lame. And I was like, yeah, I understand why Disney was like, no, I can't make it like that. I have to do this, like I
haven't read P.L. Travers' original books.
They're very lectury. They're very like, I'm going to tell you all how to behave.
I mean, I'm guessing then I have seen Saving Mr. Banks, so I'm guessing that's where that all comes from. But I mean, Mary Poppins is not my favorite Disney movie at all, which is probably a big deal. It's a hot take. But it's got a good beginning and a good end, and then it gets a little lost somewhere in the middle.
Fair enough. Last one that I have is actually Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Because in this book, they spend so much time with sullen, miserable Harry, who's grumpy and fighting with Ron and not getting along with anybody. And that's not my jam. That's probably my least favorite archetype in movies and books is the sullen, miserable teenager. That's just not for me. Almost never. And so I really don't like Harry in this book. And they tamed it way down in the movie to me, made him way more likable. And I just think like Umbridge is such a good villain because we haven't really had a good villain in Harry Potter up until that point. They're all these sort of one-off defense against the dark arts, teachers we have in Voldemort's talked about, but never really seen up to this point. And so for Umbridge to be so duplicitous and so, is such a good villain, I just think is very satisfying. And like Harry with Dumbledore's army and being a leader. And I don't know, I just think that they improved on the book quite a bit.
Yeah, again, Harry Potter was a one and done for me. So I know I read all of them, and I'm sure they're all starting to mash together in my head into one big HP ball. But the movies have always been up and down for me, you know. And I remember Order of the Phoenix just being so dark and dour, as a film. And that was my one big takeaway was I was like, ooh, and then of course, I mean, they got more dour as the franchise continued.
I mean, and the books got longer and longer and longer.
Yeah.
So that's my list. And you said you had a couple that you think movies are, I don't know if you want to throw those out.
That are better than the book?
Yeah.
I mean, so for me, there's several that I go to. American Psycho, Bret Easton Ellis's book was a movie. I love the movie, love it so much. But like most Bret Easton Ellis books, I think the books are not good. Especially American Psycho, which goes into just making the character feel so stupid. There's like expanding on film. It's a really poorly written book. Don't come at me, Bret Easton Ellis. But the movie's perfect. Movie's a perfect movie. And another one is Practical Magic, which I love the movie so very much. I was fortunate to interview Robin Swicord, who started the adaptation. She has very mixed feelings on what happened with that script. But the book, I read it as a teenager because I love the movie, and it's very much kind of like this teenage coming of age movie. The plot is just, there is no plot really. It's just, and there's a lot of like violence, or at least the threat of violence against women, which I know is kind of Alice Hoffman's point, that was just not what I wanted from this like movie about witch sisters. So I didn't include that there. Those are the two that immediately kind of come to mind.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on, talking about this, and for the fun book. And you're writing a new book right now, right?
I'm writing two right now.
New books.
Yeah, so I'm working on a book about disability at the movies. So talking a lot about disability and how films are not great with that subject. And then I'm also doing an oral history on the HBO TV series Tales from the Crypt. So two very different spectrums, which is nice. I can, as soon as I get tired with one, I can go deal with the other.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that'll be great. You'll have to come back on when.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That would be fun.
Next year is the disability in film book, and then 2026 will be the other one.
That's very cool. Very cool. We'll have an affiliate link in the description if people want to check out the Have You Read the Book book.
Please.
And if people want to follow you on socials and stuff like that, what's the best way to go?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media platforms. You can find me at Kristen Lopez 88. I also do a Substack, which you can find at kristenlopez.substack.com, where I do reviews and other little things. I have an official website where you can find out where I'm going, and all of that at kristenklopez.com. And I have a podcast as well, talking about old Hollywood and classic films called Ticklish Business. You can find that on all Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/ticklishbiz, where we do bonus podcasts, including But Have You Read the Series?
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks again. And we'll definitely have to have you back.
Yes, please, anytime.
All right. Bye, everyone. I'd like to thank Kristen for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun to get to talk with her. I had a blast. And let us know what you think about things we talked about. What books do you think are better than the movies? And what movies do you think are better than the books? And what do you think about adaptations in general? Love to hear what you think. And you can find all of our episodes of Female Film Critics Panel in the playlist that I have in the description. So check that out. And you can find me, Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. If you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. Also have a Patreon group and merch store. And you can get Female Film Critics Panel, our logo. You can get the shirt design. And I think it's really cute. So take a look. And thanks so much to Kristen. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.